Welcome back. Well, after the local election results, it's not the easiest week for Cabinet Ministers to come on shows like this and defend the government. But fortunately, the Cabinet's newest member, Rory Stewart, is used to all that. After months of defending the Prime Minister's Brexit deal on the airwaves, his reward was being made the new International Development Secretary, and he's here in the studio now. Thank you very much for being on the programme. It feels like we should start with the local election results, which were really a bit of a bloodbath for the Conservative Party. I mean, down more than 1,300 councillors. I'm sure that you followed the results very closely as they came in. At what point did you realise just how bad things were?
I think it became clear quite early, and I think one of the very interesting things about this is how much this is about Brexit. It's not really about the local councillors who, many of them have done an incredible job, and I think it's hugely frustrating for them because they're trying to focus on issues that really matter to people locally, and I think it's important for our local democracy that people vote for people for what they're responsible for.
So they're paying the price for the government's failure to take the UK out of the EU?
Labour and Conservatives at the moment are suffering from this whole Brexit thing. Tortuous, sort of endless Brexit thing, and we've got to get beyond it. The message of this, we've got to get beyond it, but there's another message. If you look at the detail of those results, look at places like St Albans, look at the fact that really where the Conservatives were losing their votes most are in the moderate centre ground seats. And that shows we need a Brexit deal, that we shouldn't follow this idea that somehow the future of the Conservative Party is trying to outdo Nigel Farage. The future of a party like the Conservatives, and indeed should be true for Labour too, is in the centre ground of British politics.
I mean, are you worried that the Remain voting Conservatives will never come back to the party?
I believe they will come back, but I believe we've got to work very, very hard to get them back, and we've got to reassure them, above all, that we're not going to go for an unnecessary, damaging no-deal Brexit, but that we can get a Brexit that is pragmatic, works well, and keeps us close to Europe economically.
I just want to have a look at something just to illustrate just how bad the night was for the Conservatives. I mean, these show your local election results from 1995 to 2019, and you can see that really the only comparable result is back in 1995. It's going to take you a long time to recover from this, isn't it?
So it's been a big impact. If you look at those results, what you'll see is that Labour actually lost a lot of seats during the Blair government, but they tended to lose them more steadily. In our case, this is we did reasonably well in 2015 as a governing party. And as you see there, we suffered badly in 2019. But this is a Brexit effect. This is people's frustration. The fact that Parliament is not delivering. They want it done. They want to move on. There are so many things that all of us can talk about. It doesn't matter whether you're a Lib Dem or Labour or Conservative, about this country, about housing, about climate, particularly at the moment. And we've got to get back to that centre ground. And that's the way that we'll take these seats back. That's the way that we'll win an election, but above all, that's the way we'll restore people's faith in government.
I just wonder if your analysis is right to focus on those Remain voting seats in the local elections where clearly you did very badly. The Brexit Party weren't standing, were they? So in the European elections, we could see a completely different picture, couldn't we?
Yes.
Much worse.
It's true they weren't standing, but it's also very important to understand in 2017, I mean, if we get onto the electoral maths of this, most Brexit voters voted for the Conservative Party, but 4 million Remain voters voted for the Conservative Party. If the Conservative Party were to make the mistake of trying to outdo Nigel Farage, which I'm sure we won't, but it is something that a few of my colleagues are talking about, then we would lose those 4 million Remain voters. We'd lose young people, we'd lose Scotland, we'd lose London, and we'd lose a lot of the most energetic parts of this country. We've got to be a broad party. We've got to be able to stretch all the way from Ken Clarke right the way through to Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Is the problem partly your leader? Ian Duncan-Smith has called on Theresa May to announce her resignation.
No, I really strongly disagree with this. I think this idea that somehow it's all to do with an individual is naive. This is about Brexit. This is about the fact we have a country which is divided right down the middle.
But the Prime Minister must be responsible for the Brexit policy.
Well, the Prime Minister is responsible for Brexit policy, and she's done...
She hasn't been able to get through.
Yes.
Despite several attempts.
All that is true. So she's put a very courageous effort in trying to get something through a divided Parliament without a majority and with a very split country. But honestly, I don't think anybody doing that role, I don't think if some sort of superhero turned up, George Clooney suddenly became Prime Minister, I don't think he'd be able to charm his way through this problem. The problem is not the individual. The problem
that's something I'd like to
Brexit.
see. Theresa May has written a piece in the Mail on Sunday today, effectively laying down the gauntlet for Jeremy Corbyn, back a deal together. Let's listen to what the voters said in the local election. She says, let's do a deal. I mean, do you think that that is now the way forward?
It's not my preference, not the Prime Minister's preference. We would have much preferred the Prime Minister's deal. But yes, now that has to be the right option.
Even if it's a customs union, a permanent customs union?
Well, the details of this have to be worked out, right? But I don't think Labour wants to restrict our future trade policy. I don't think they want to allow unrestricted immigration. They want to have control over immigration. So we agree on so many things.
What Labour want is a permanent customs union. And we heard it from Jonathan Ashworth earlier in the programme. We've heard it consistently from them. So,
what they've been talking about is they keep saying they want a permanent customs union where the UK has control over trade negotiations with other countries. So they're talking about something that doesn't really exist out there in the world. They're talking about a sort of Turkey triple plus. We need to see the details of this, but really our positions are about a quarter of an inch apart. We agree on 99% of this stuff. And there is an advantage to this, which people are not talking about, which is if we can get a cross-party deal, then there's a possibility that it will remain, it'll be more sustainable. It'll be more stable. In other words, when a government changes, a party changes, we're not going to have Brexit suddenly turned on its head. We need investors to feel this will be there for 30 years, not just for 4 years. And a cross-party deal is a way to do that.
But that's exactly what some people in your party are so scared about, isn't it? That a customs union will be agreed with Labour that, in their minds, takes away all of the benefits of leaving the European Union, and then there's no way to unpick it.
Well, so two separate issues. Firstly, it's not true that this would take away all the benefits from leaving the European Union. I mean, even in the very worst case scenario, Turkey is obviously not in the European Union. If you were to go down that option, you'd have full control of freedom of movement. The City of London wouldn't be regulated. You'd be free on services. You wouldn't be paying tens of billions of pounds a year to the European Union.
You wouldn't put that on the bus, though, would you? Vote to leave and be like Turkey?
No, we're a much bigger economy than that. We're an amazing country and we're a much larger economy and we have far more potential than that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when some of my colleagues say Britain would be a vassal state, they're extraordinary exaggerations. This would be a real Brexit. We'd leave the European Commission, we'd leave the Parliament. But more important to that, I just sort of keep coming back to that, is that what we really need for the country is a deal that lasts. And pushing for an extreme Farage-style deal, which has no real majority support in the country and no majority support in Parliament, is firstly impossible, but secondly, wouldn't last through changes in Parliament, so it wouldn't be any good for investors.
OK. Do you think a deal's going to be done?
I think a deal can be done.
But do you think it will be done?
A lot of this rests on, to be honest, one man, on whether Jeremy Corbyn really wants to deliver a Brexit deal. But I think if he wants to do it, it'll be actually surprisingly easy to do because our positions are very, very close.
So the PM's happy to do the deal. It's Jeremy Corbyn who's the question mark.
We are keen to get a good Brexit deal done as soon as possible so we can move on to talk, in my case, about things like climate. That's why I'm very excited to be the International Development Secretary. I want to talk about climate, I want to talk about the environment, I want to re-engage young people, and I don't want us to spend the next 10 years sitting in the studio talking about the details of Brexit.
Yeah, I look forward to an interview that we can do on things that aren't just about Brexit. But away from Brexit, I mean, you've had a bit of a rollercoaster week. You were one of the beneficiaries of the extraordinary sacking of Gavin Williamson. I mean, look at the papers today. There's some pretty vicious briefing about Gavin Williamson, isn't there? Are you comfortable with some of the stories that are coming out? People are obviously leaking them.
Well, I haven't read all of that. I'd say that, firstly, he was an energetic defence minister, and I don't like criticising colleagues in any way at all. Equally, the National Security Council has to be kept secret. I mean, it's the core. The head of MI6 sits there. The head of MI5 sits there. This is where intelligence from our agents in the field comes. This is where intelligence from the United States and our other allies comes. It's unbelievably important that we do a refresh. So it seems like, unfortunately, that Gavin, although he'd been an energetic defence secretary, appears to have repeated things that were in that
Although he
meeting.
denies that.
Yeah. I'm no Mark Sedwell, who seems to be at the centre of this very well. I've known him back in the day when we were both in Afghanistan together 12, 14 years ago. I have enormous admiration for him, and I think that he will have thought about this carefully and made the right step. And the reason why this is important is to be a serious country in the world, we've got to be able to disagree with each other. One of the reasons we got in a mess in Iraq and Afghanistan is we weren't good enough at the equivalence of the National Security Council of really saying that isn't going to work in a way that could never leak. Because sometimes the things you have to say there you wouldn't want to see printed in the papers.
You talked there about knowing Sir Mark said well. Are you concerned that some of your colleagues seem to be briefing against him in this tit for tat?
Yes, I absolutely. I mean, I think it's incredibly important that our civil servants are left totally out of this. One of the reasons I'm very proud to be a government minister is because of our civil service. They work all the hours that God gives them. They are incredibly dedicated. They are non-political people. It's totally unfair to put them in the firing line here.
Now, just finally, it's refreshing to interview somebody who is very open about the fact that you'd like to be the next Prime Minister. So are you going to throw your hat in the ring when there's a vacancy?
Yes, but I am now so excited to be the International Development Secretary. And to be honest, the thing that matters even more to me than that is getting this thing right, because climate change is a cataclysm facing us. This is our biggest instrument to engage with the environment internationally, potentially, without being too pretentious, save the planet and ultimately save us. So what gets me out of bed in the morning, the reason I'm proud and communicate this to my 2-year-old or my 4-year-old, is that I think I've got the greatest gift on earth to be the International Development Secretary.
I think you need to let your colleagues know how you've managed to do it, how you've managed to be completely open about the fact that you want to be Prime Minister, and yet you've somehow been promoted and been seen as a loyalist as well. How's that happened?
I think you just got to be straight. I mean, if people feel that they would like to get into that competition, they should say so. And we should talk about what we believe in. And I think talking about what we believe in matters in everyday life, but it also matters just in doing good policy. I felt this in prisons, that just being honest about not the waffle, but is this prison clean? Have we cleaned up the garbage? Are we searching people properly at the gate? Or in terms of DFID, OK, we're dealing with Ebola. 1,000 people have now died in DRC, and this is a disease that could come to Britain again unless we deal with it. But it's also about being honest about problems of refrigeration, about that fridge made in Bognor Regis by a British company, which is now in the jungles of the DRC, and getting that right, getting the temperatures right, getting the basics right is the key to government.
There you go, an interview on everything from Brexit to fridges in Bognor Regis. Thank you. Very much for being on the programme, Rory Stewart.
Thank you, Fab.